People are still joining, but we can go ahead and get started. Just a few comments about yesterday. I found it to be stunning. I don't know how else to say it. The speakers had so much to share with us, and really the dramatic changes that are needed and the resources that are available to make those changes. And the depth of behavioral changes that we need to make, and the interconnection. I think Ted was mentioning this earlier this morning, how electrifying buildings doesn't help if we don't have renewable energy to supply that electricity. And we clearly need both centralized systems and decentralized distributed energy systems. And the synergy between, for example, Michael Bobker's early work leading the development of ASHRAE Guideline 32 on high performance buildings. ACEEE, Nora mentioned the study that they had done, and the synergy there with what BEST has been struggling to do with the HPBOP certification for high performance building operations professionals. Tremendous synergy there. The awareness from DOE, the presentation by Shreyas
Jatkar, yeah.
Talking about push versus pull on the workforce side.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly a great awareness that what happened with the ARA programs on energy efficiency and renewable energy, there was such a huge push to, as quickly as possible, train all these people for jobs that never materialized. And I think DOE now is very, very clear about the need to stimulate both sides of the equation, which is really, really heartening and important for us to be aware of.
You know, one question I had for Shreyas, I didn't get to ask him, was how they measure the impact of what they're doing and measure the jobs, because there's a lot of complexity, small contractors, larger HVAC and control companies. So something we might talk about in the future sometime.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to emphasize what you said, Peter, is that we have we know we have training needs associated with new technologies and this decarbonization pathway, which is a little bit different from the energy efficiency pathway. It's energy efficiency plus other things. And that's a big pivot for a lot of the workforce out there in buildings has been trained on energy efficiency. So that's a big pivot for many people in those workforce.
Well, it's that ability to think systemically as well at a system level, which is one of the hardest things to teach in terms of systems. One of our faculty network members wrote his dissertation on systems thinking, and it's been around for a long time, since Donella Meadows and the limits to growth and all of that. But we have to think in systems, and I think you'll be highlighting that in your presentation this morning, Marianne.
Yes.
The grid interactive issues, all of these things, the system complexity, as we try to connect all of the dots and make the changes necessary. And my biggest takeaway was just the scale of change that we are undertaking. And we don't have a lot of time, and we need to be very thoughtful about how we do it.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges is the incentives, getting the incentives right in the industry. so that people make the right retrofits and investments in new buildings. But it's a challenge because we're still, utility bills are what people think about for cost effectiveness, saving money on utility bills. But
Mhm.
greenhouse gas savings are not always aligned with the utility bill savings. So there's some challenges there.
Yeah. And I think that's why Peter Alsbach's presentation was so important, the role of cities in enforcing and creating enforcement mechanisms for which, as he pointed out, are really incentives. I want to avoid the penalty, so I'll do the right thing and make
Yeah.
these changes. So even though it looks like a penalty, it's really an incentive. And Boston has clearly taken a very strong lead on that, and I think other cities will follow. But in essence, it's changing the market dynamics in a very direct and profound way, I think.
Yeah,
Do you want?
go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. No,
Well,
do you?
I was actually gonna pivot to today. So you're gonna hear some of that additional detail on that topic from Joshua Case today. Because Joshua also is going to be talking about building performance standards. And we've been working with Jessica Granderson when she was at the White House. There's federal building performance standards coming. And we're working with cities across the US to try to advance the use of this framework, which started with benchmarking and disclosure laws, but is becoming more pointed towards greenhouse gas data. One of the interesting problems, Peter, is that we are looking at the annual energy use of a building, but there's a lot of interest in looking at the hourly load shapes. So currently the building performance standards are based on total energy, but not when you use the energy. And that's one of the evolutions that's going to come in the future. We can talk a little about that today. So I'll be going over a big picture on the technologies for decarbonization and what we're seeing in the US goals and what the Department of Energy's portfolio looks like of things that they care about. Because when we retrofit buildings or think about new buildings, we also have things like health and resilience to extreme heat and things like that. So I'll be talking a little about the broad portfolio and specifically the decarbonization activities. And then we're also going to hear about zero emissions appliance standards. I think you have Chris Halfnight today from
Yes.
Urban Green Council. Do you want to mention his work?
Yeah, Chris is Senior Director for Policy and Research for Urban Green in New York City. So he's been tracking New York's efforts around performance standards. And he's going to be looking at policy issues as well, emerging policy trends. So we had, as we said yesterday, we have this series of policy kind of perspectives, and then we have the technology perspectives that will be more abundant today. And I'm just amazed at how people are weaving in workforce, policy, and technology in these sessions because they're all so interconnected.
Yeah, and after that, you're going to hear from Nora Hart, and she's going to be talking about energy audits for decarbonization. And energy audits have been, you go into a building, you figure out what's there, and then you determine what retrofits you need to lower the energy intensity. But she's actually going to be sharing with you the emissions reduction audit checklist. So we're moving from energy efficiency again to these emissions. What are the emissions? And you're going to see an emphasis on things like natural gas, electrification, and trying to make sure the retrofits improve the energy efficiency, as well as thinking about the overall greenhouse gases. Similarly, after that, you're going to hear from Henry Richardson, who's a impact analyst with a company called WattTime. WattTime was a UC Berkeley spinoff sponsored by the Rocky Mountain Institute. And they're trying to provide real-time signals that reflect how clean the grid is, so you can control a building to use more energy when it's clean and less energy when the emissions are high. So when you have more gas or even coal energy, so you have a real-time signal for controls. And we actually know that Nest thermostats, you can actually follow a watt time signal and try to run your air conditioner at the cleanest times possible. I think we've substituted at 11 today. Ian Walker's talking today. I think we got that worked out, right?
Yes.
So Ian is going to be talking about decarbonization retrofits in homes and heat pump retrofits. And he's doing really important work on cost compression and what it's going to take. I have a couple of comments on his work in my presentation. And you're going to hear from Avon Satre-Malloy about the Advanced Building Construction Initiative and embodied carbon. That's a really interesting topic because we tend to look at operational energy and operational emissions, but we're interested in how much energy is embodied in the steel or the cement in the building and things we can do about that. Last two on today before the roundtables are Daniel Gerber is going to be talking about smart panels, DC power, and low power electrification. I'm going to make a couple of comments about that in my opening remarks as well, and really interesting work on electrification there. And then Peter Grant is an excellent presenter. He's going to be talking about retrofit-ready electric water heating. And water heating is a flexible load. So as we change out water heaters to heat pumps, we want those heat pumps to be able to respond to real-time signals. Then there's a series of roundtables, community college and visiting faculty internships at LBL. We'll be talking about high school outreach and building automation systems lab in a box, contemporary controls products for lab integration, and HVAC excellence annual conference and resources for educators. So really important resources today that we're organizing for the attendees and for the materials for the BEST Center.
Yeah, I really want to encourage people to stick around for the roundtables. The contemporary controls and HVAC excellence will be back to back for 30 minutes each. Jen Brinker has some really interesting curriculum program and connection with high schools that are teaching BAS, kind of a lab in the box, and so that you don't have to be a BAS expert to teach. She's done an amazing job designing these lab modules and curriculum modules to go with them. And finally, Colette Flood and her team talking about ways to connect with the lab.
Hey, Peter, if I might, I just
Yes,
wanted to make a few quick announcements as reminders to our attendees. If any of you need closed captioning, right, just go to the show captions tab at the bottom along that menu, right? And you can activate it. You can turn on a live transcript and save it to your computer. And then also for any of you who attended yesterday or certainly today and don't plan on perhaps returning tomorrow, we would really appreciate it if you would fill out the event survey, which you can access on your navigation bar at the far right. Okay, so this is the navigation bar that you will see in any of the virtual environments for our event. Doesn't matter whether you're in the auditorium or the lobby, you'll always see that bar. So it's on SurveyMonkey and really shouldn't take more than about 5 or 10 minutes of your time. That's it. Thank you.